But why should we assume in this definition of God that he has this interest in human behavior, in morality and so on? And after all, if he was omnipotent and omniscient and wanted people to behave in a certain way, we don't know anything else about him. After all, I don't think we know anything about him. But if we, wouldn't you expect, if you were omnipotent, you'd expect results and expect people to do and shouldn't our presumption being looking at human behavior and wondering what omnipotence thinks about it, if we believed in omnipotence, as far as omnipotence is concerned, he's not interested in human behavior. This is, okay, I mean, why should one assume? Anyway, these are different things. People don't reckon, but you might well have an argument that might show there was existing a being with some of these characteristics without the others. The second thing I want to say is that these characteristics are at least compatible, but the God that I understand Dr. Craig believes in is one who is described as good and benevolent and so on, but also is described as a being who is expecting that the majority of the creatures he has created, he is going to torture forever. Well, if you think these characteristics are compatible with benevolence, if your absolute values think that torturing anyone at all, apart from forever, is okay, well, this is not my idea. I regard it as morally compulsive not to torture anyone at all. I regard this concept, I'm not saying this is a reason for not believing that the torturer runs the universe. I am saying that these two characteristics are incompatible. I think, actually, Dr. Craig at some time is a little anxious about these things. I have somewhere, yes. He says, if we take Scripture seriously, we must admit that the vast majority of persons in the world are condemned and will be forever lost, even if in some relatively rare cases a person might be saved through his response to the light that he has apart from some special revelation. He then goes on to indicate, no Orthodox Christian likes the doctrine of hell or delights in anyone's condemnation. I truly wish that universalism were true, but it isn't. Well, I regard that as a sign of grace that he decided. But I still have to say that these two things are simply incompatible. It's a nightmare. And the idea that such a punishment could be just, don't you know what justice is? Would it be regarded? Of course, if you like, the right ones are getting the punishment. But justice isn't a matter of simply getting the right ones punished for the crime. Look, the punishment needs to be to some extent proportionate to the seriousness of the crime. And how could there be any offense committed by a human being in a short life that deserved a literally infinite punishment? So, what I'm basically trying to show is that there aren't good reasons for believing it. And my fundamental contention is that one shouldn't expect to be able to know things outside the universe and so on. And if you like, the burden of proof lies on the person who says this. So no number of unanswered arguments from Dr. Craig will be sufficient to leave what I've said on one side, well, that's no use. I've produced all these arguments he hasn't answered. because no one could answer in the available time all the great long list of arguments he's produced, but what simply answered, and I think couldn't be answered, is the argument, if you like, against the presumption of thinking that we're in a position to say what was going on, if anything was going on outside the universe. But let's look at what I believe is called the column argument, which is a great favorite with Dr. The universe must have had a beginning because nothing could exist without beginning and without end. Fair enough, I think this is a good argument. But this is supposed to be an argument for creation by a bodiless person, a notion I find very difficult to understand anyway. All the people I know are creatures of flesh and blood, but still, that it was created by a bodiless person who apparently was himself uncreated and eternal. Now, it seems to me that I don't doubt the universe had a beginning, because this is the present view of physical science, and it looks as if at least this part of the Big Bang theory is likely to be with us permanently, but there may be some further things added. But surely, if time had to have a beginning, how do we explain that beginning by saying, oh, well, the beginning was started off, the whole universe was created by a being, that being, yes, existed eternally. Well, if this argument about time if time couldn't have had a beginning, then how is it that, as it were, there's a funny sort of time of which, of course, none of us have ever had an experience, which, yes, of course, this never had a beginning and it will never have an end. You know, simply won't do. The argument that gets us to the creation is inconsistent with the desired explanation of it. So I think, again, we come back to a decent ignorance. I'm often thought to be a rather arrogant chap. How wrong people can be. But I've never believed that I could give you a sort of guidebook outside the universe. I'd be a bit hard-pressed to give you a guidebook to a fairly small area. But, you know, this idea that, we can, here's a group of rational chaps, and let's expect that they can all recognize an argument showing that this is how the universe began, and we know something about what must exist behind the universe. I don't think it will work at all, this thing. Then, what about this, my contention that an omnipotent being could perfectly well, if he wanted people to behave in a certain way, if this was the only thing that would content him, that they became his devoted and obedient children, well, why didn't he make them that way? You know, ordinary human parents would love their children to be obedient and virtuous and so on. Wouldn't we all who've been parents? And we're all, I suspect, and you may have done better than us, but we've been rather unsuccessful. They're terribly good people, but they're far from obedient and far, see what I mean? Well, now, but granted the resources of omnipotence, I think I could manage this.